This is the final part of my fitness journey, and I will be going through how I developed a better understanding of my mentality towards fitness and the physical effects from overexertion. So I started university, a completely different environment with a whole new routine, and I just couldn't handle it. There's no order for me to fall back on, so this was when I realised I had to make a change. It was the first time I discovered the gym. This was an interesting start, being able to build different muscles instead of doing 200 plus push-ups a day. I started with the basics, and I tried every part of the gym equipment, but I still managed to maintain my consistency of doing pull-ups. I'd spend 2 hours training there 4 or 5 times a week. It's not exactly like I knew what I was doing, but I did it anyway. And I started doing my 2-kilometre runs on the treadmill. This was when I could really train for it. I even got some advice from a running coach and finally started to do it strategically. A balance had to start occurring as well, as I had new friendships to maintain, but it was managed well enough. I discovered climbing after a while, and this really helps put things into perspective. See, with climbing, it's not like running or gym work, where you could possibly get one more rep in there. With climbing, if you miss a hold or your forearms give out, there's no returning to it. You have to physically rest your arms for at least 5 minutes before you start again. And this was so strange to me. It was finally impossible to not rest, and it was freeing. It made me feel stronger, actually. I also carried on with running long distance, and I did this every Sunday. I eventually reached 10 miles, and let me tell you, those long runs were one of the hardest I've ever done. I had to create a motto for myself when I ran these long miles, as it would require a different type of motivation to my normal running. So it would go like this. I said to myself, I can breathe, I can blink, I can even cry and slow down, but I was not allowed to stop. And it worked for a while. I could complete the 9 to 10 miles without stopping once. But then I realised something. In my head, I couldn't stop for anything. If there was a blister on my foot, I couldn't stop. If there was a rock in my shoe, I couldn't stop. Even though it would have been more efficient to sort it out, I didn't, because everything had to be painful to mean something. I remember during winter I would go on my long runs in the dark without stopping, and those were the most painful. Not just physically, but mentally. I had to combat every doubt I'd ever had in my life. And then I started having difficulties with this idea of philosophy. Throughout my life, I struggled to find meaning, but this was a lot worse in university. I had difficulties with philosophy and started to have issues with my purpose. If I was not enough unless I was exercising, then what was left? A piece of meat with a drive to carry on. What was the point in any of it? I didn't even have an end goal in mind or a person I wanted to be. I hit this wall where if there was no God, there was no point. I was kind of acting like a nihilist. So I started to study every single type of philosophy, but I can never settle for the usual, you just do what you can and be happy. This is when I reached a very dark time in my life, to the point my identity and self-worth was completely destroyed. I felt trapped in my own body, and it felt like there was nothing I could do to resolve it. So the only meaning I had was my exercise. I even started to have body image issues, and I had this all throughout my life, but it got worse as I gained more weight from muscles. It felt like this was another thing I couldn't combat, the way my stomach looked or my chin, or even the feeling on my own skin. I had such low self-esteem, I couldn't even fathom the idea that what I did was enough for myself, for my family, for even God. I did start drinking more, because it's uni and everyone does, but sometimes when I did drink, these thoughts would be exemplified. These thoughts of who I wanted to be and who I wasn't. So now my routine consisted of running 5 times a week, climbing once or twice a week, and going to the gym 4 times a week. It was a difficult routine, something I didn't have control over. And when the disappointment kept occurring over and over, I just couldn't handle it. I wasn't exactly perfect all days, and when my parkrun time would drop to 22 minutes and now 23, I realised how much I had before and that there was no appreciation for it. And these times started to define who I was as a person. I knew rest was important, but I didn't listen to that voice that was telling me so. I was determined, and that's what I had going for me. I said to myself, I will push until I can't anymore. I couldn't deal with the thought that I could be lazy or something, even though I wasn't. My body was starting to desperately find some energy, and it had to stop my cycle so it couldn't use all that energy up. That's how hard I was pushing. I went to the doctor to see if it was something else, and my blood tests were fine. It was simply that my body became starved. And then something else happened. I couldn't run. It was a couple of weeks ago now, but I did a 5-mile race, pushed to my extreme. And afterwards I got a pain in my shin, but I just thought it's nothing, just pain you get after a 5-mile race. So one day later, I ran again, my normal routine. I tried it again the next day, but something wasn't right. I could feel this sharp pain every time I walk or run. I did some research and I thought it was a shin splint. And because I didn't want it to get worse, I stopped running. It was the first time in a long time since the age of 15 I had to fully rest. No running at all, because even I knew I couldn't run on something that could be permanently damaged. So I did other things, like cross-training, but it was mentally unbearable. How could I prove myself now? This was the point I realised it was an unhealthy obsession. Beforehand, at the age of 15, I was told it was unhealthy by somebody else. At age 17, I replaced the obsession with other obsessive things so I could avoid the truth. But now I finally realised what I was doing was just a full-on obsession to combat the hatred I had for myself. I hated myself more than anyone could ever hate one person. So I finally burnt out, and it scared me. I took an injury to unlearn this perception of being a machine, and I hope this doesn't happen to you as well. I'm still recovering from these shin splints even now, and I haven't been able to run on with them properly for weeks. My parkrun time has decreased, and it's, like I said, unbearable. But this is all with recovery, and I'm stronger than I ever was before, not just physically but mentally. It's the fact you want to carry on even when everything is at a loss, or when everything is slow and feels unmeaningful. I realised I wasn't a broken machine that needed to be fixed. I was simply a human improving as much as possible. And now I can say I'm starting to improve. I'll be honest, social media probably didn't help. For me, it wasn't that big of an impact. Maybe like 10 to 15% of the reason for my downfall. As you know, seeing videos pushing onto you that the only way up is by going up every day without resting wasn't exactly helpful. That even if you injured yourself or you were in pain, you should keep going because otherwise you are weak. That people in the olden days would do worse things than you, so you should be grateful you don't have to work that hard. Another thing that made rest so difficult was the hidden meaning behind it. What if I was just being lazy? What if I'm too weak to do it? Especially when I was back home for summer, where it's more difficult to access a gym, or that people would judge me for exercising less. So this need to push was not just for myself, but for other people. Again, I want to make this clear. I wouldn't want people to become lazy and cower at the sight of pain in their muscles when they are doing a heavy set. As I believe sometimes the only way you will improve is by pushing hard and with consistency. Like with pull-ups, if I didn't set myself a goal of 1 pull-up a day, I would never have developed as well as I did. However, you need to be smart. I've learned recently that rest is a big step, and sometimes it could be more necessary than the actual exercise. For example, let's say there's 2 people. One person I tell to do 10 bicep curls every day for a week, without any efficient nutrition or rest, compared to the person I tell to do 5 bicep curls a day, working his way up to 10 with more rest days and nutrients. Who do you think will perform better? You don't even need knowledge and science to know that. It's smart training rather than knuckle-dragging through exercise. In the end, I realised it didn't matter that I was improving. It mattered that I was pushing myself to the extreme to prove how good I am. It was unhealthy, and there's no reason this can't happen to you. For a long time, I thought my whole life should just be based on discipline and that my value was based on how far I can push. But what I realised recently is that discipline without self-worth just becomes a form of punishment for yourself. I'm glad I did all of it. I don't regret it. It showed what I could do, what I was capable of. But again, it wasn't smart training. Rest was the hardest lesson I learned, and this is the lesson you must now learn on your fitness journey, no matter what stage you are at. I still struggle with this obsession all the time, but I'm aiming for more autonomy, and I want to aim to do what I want to do, rather than doing something out of obligation. I want the choice to do it, not because I think I'm not working hard enough, but for me to show how great I am. Rest was the hardest lesson I ever learned, but it was also the bravest. I used to think I was a machine that I had to push until I was broken, but I'm not a machine. I'm a human being who has more strength than any machine could ever have. It isn't just about how far you can run or how much you can lift. It's about still carrying on even when you can't do your best. It's about persevering when there is no crowd shouting you on. And think back to my motto. I could cry so down if I wanted to, but I wouldn't stop. As long as I was present, that was what mattered. Thank you for listening, and I hope you got some insightful information from my fitness journey.